You know, never again is supposed to mean never again for anyone. When you've been brought up Jewish and that's your history, you can smell it, you can sense it. It's bloody genocide.
I got arrested on the Defend Our Juries action to lift the ban against the prescription of the group Palestine Action.
We are well aware from either our own or our family history of what genocide means, and it appalls us that such a genocide can be taking place yet again this long after the Holocaust ended.
The UK government is enacting an unprecedented crackdown on protest. Since October 2023, this has taken the form of police raids, intensifying police surveillance, and preemptive arrests targeting pro-Palestine activists. In July, this escalated with the government's decision to prescribe the direct action group Palestine Action, making it a criminal offence to be a member of or show support for the organisation. Since the ban came into force, mounting numbers of people have risked arrest under the Terrorism Act by agreeing to hold signs in Parliament Square reading, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." Now, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has announced fresh protest restrictions in the wake of a deadly attack on a synagogue in Manchester. Prime Minister Keir Starmer warned a protest opposing Palestine Action's ban could cause distress and urged those taking part to recognise and respect the grief of British Jews in the aftermath of Thursday's attack. London's Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley said that the protest would likely create further tensions and some might say lack sensitivity. Starmer has since said that he is looking at going even further than the measures announced by Mahmood, including potential powers to take action against specific chants at pro-Palestine protests. This is occurring against a backdrop of growing far-right mobilisations across the country, something which many people whose relatives died in the Holocaust are particularly alert to. I speak to the Jewish activists willing to risk their freedom to oppose the government's ban on Palestine Action and its broader crackdown on the right to protest. For them, it is not pro-Palestine activists that are a threat, but the government's conflation of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. All of them cut unlikely terrorism suspects. Most of them are over the age of 50, most of them are descendants of Holocaust survivors. But it's precisely these backgrounds that motivated them to put themselves on the front line.
I'm Zoe Cohen. I'm a 54-year-old self-employed mum from the northwest of England. I'm Jewish, and I was arrested along with 530 other people in Parliament Square on the 9th of August. We were all holding a sign saying, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." So why did I do it? Why did I sit there and hold that sign and risk arrest for a terrorism charge, which is just mind-blowingly bonkers and also scary? Honestly, I got to the point that I couldn't not do it. I felt absolutely compelled. There's no other way to describe it. The sheer horror of what I was seeing day in, day out, that will go with me to my grave. The complicity of the UK state and the media. And I think the final straw was the prescription of Palestine Action as an appalling smokescreen to distract from this country's involvement in genocide and as an absolute attack on our democratic rights. I couldn't sit by any longer. This is hard to talk about without crying. I'll probably start crying. So I was brought up Jewish. My father's parents left Eastern Europe before the Second World War to escape fascism. I grew up learning about the Holocaust from a young age and was brought up with a strong set of values. And when October the 7th happened, I was really shocked and really scared, but horrified at the escalation of the response by Israel. I've never been a Zionist. I never agreed with the settlements, etc. But I didn't understand the full extent of the Israeli apartheid and the full history of the horrors against the Palestinian people. I've been, marching and on the streets with other ordinary people in Manchester and London since October 23. I just felt compelled to be there. And after a few months, I created my own little patch, very homemade. It says Jews Against Genocide, and I wear it every time I go on the streets and march peacefully with other people of all faiths and none. And I wore it in Parliament Square when I sat for several hours waiting to be arrested. Never again is supposed to mean never again for anyone. It doesn't matter what your skin colour, what your faith. Genocide is wrong. When you've been brought up Jewish and that's your history, you can smell it, you can sense it. It's bloody genocide. It's so obvious. It's like we're being gaslit. It's just appalling. There's so many of us who know that this is wrong, and what else can you do? It was a strange kind of anxiety-causing but also beautiful experience on the 9th of August. When my time finally came, it just felt right to lie down and just to be carried. I couldn't comply with the state. It was just a non-violent act of non-compliance to just lie there. And when my arresting officer, bent down and started saying whatever he was saying about you're going to be arrested under the Terrorism Act. And also, I just said to him quietly, I think I said genocide is wrong, isn't it? Or genocide is a crime, isn't it? And I think he said yes. But then 4 of them, or however many of them, picked me up and started carrying me. And the whole emotion of the whole day, the whole event, and also the last 2 years and more besides, just came out of me, and I just started sobbing. And sobbing and saying how it was genocide. And it's been a deeply affecting experience. Seeing and feeling the direct experience of the state doing this, not just to me, but to hundreds and hundreds of other people. Because this story is not really about Palestine Action. The story is about genocide, the collusion in genocide, the covering up of it, and the gaslighting of the population. And it's about the utter removal of our democratic right to protest. If an organisation or a group that is about direct action can be labelled a terrorist organisation, then that basically wipes away meaningful protest in the UK. And we can see it, the population, this country, we can see it. We're not stupid, but they're treating us like we're stupid. I think, given what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, we need to do everything we possibly can. And it really does come to something when Jewish people and descendants of Holocaust survivors are being arrested and taken to court for terrorism. To try to stop a genocide, it's insane. It's insane, and you can't stay quiet when that's happening. I'm sure for all of us who've been watching the televised live stream genocide, there are moments that just will never leave you. And one of the moments that will never ever leave me, amongst many, is watching parents being given see-through plastic bags of their children's body parts, or indeed body parts, not even knowing that they may be their children, and they're carrying a bag like someone might carry something from the butchers in this country. It's absolutely disgusting and appalling beyond measure. It feels like all of this, the actions of the Israeli state, the actions of the UK state and the mainstream media, denying genocide, supporting Israel, playing down the suffering of the Palestinians, all of that, calling out anti-Semitism when it's not anti-Semitism to criticise the actions of the Israeli state. It's actually making Jews less safe. I feel more scared. I've actually never felt more scared for being Jewish before, ever. Because why can't people see a huge alarm bell going off when the right wing of a political party or of an ideological group or whatever in the UK, the US and right across Europe, when the far right and the right wing are saying they care about Jewish people? Put 2 and 2 together, for God's sake. All of these actions are making Jews less safe everywhere. And partly, I sometimes wonder if that's on purpose, actually. But also, Yvette Cooper, before the reshuffle, was saying, you don't, and this was being reiterated right across the media, you people who did this action, you're maybe naive, you don't really understand the full details about Palestine Action. Well, do we trust that? Do we trust that these are the politicians who are saying there's no genocide when we can see as plain as the nose on our face that genocide is being committed? And these are the same people who are in the process of potentially giving a £2 billion contract to Elbit Systems, Israel's leading defence contractor, to become the main training institution of the UK military. Like, if they're even considering that, how can we trust them? I don't know what they're going to share, but it's very hard to trust when you are told absolute nonsense day in, day out. And I clearly am not the only person believing that. I think the government is in a distinct minority now, and it's going to look increasingly stupid unless it changes course very soon.
My name is Carolyn and I got arrested on the Defend Our Juries action to lift the ban against the prescription of the group Palestine Action on September the 6th. And my arrest was caught on camera. I was in the middle of an interview. It got caught on camera and went quite viral, which created a few issues for me. But I think also that was an amazing thing to have happen because it meant that other Jewish voices get listened to. And actually, I was a Zionist. I lived in Israel. I married an Israeli. And it was only as I became much older when I started to kind of think I've had blinkers on. After that, I felt like I have to really look at the whole issue of Zionism in Israel. And I did go to Palestine in the early 2000s. I went from being a Zionist to a non-Zionist to now an active anti-Zionist. But at the moment, with what's going on under Keir Starmer's governance, I feel it's really important to speak out about being a Jew. And I am a Jew. I've actually had a DNA test. I'm 99.9% Ashkenazi Jew. It's really important that alternative Jewish voices are heard. I stand under the banner at the demonstrations, at the monthly demonstrations against the genocide in Gaza, which is what it is, a genocide happening in my name, which shames me. And I stand under a banner of Holocaust survivors and descendants against the genocide. I feel compelled because of my family history, because of my ancestry, because of my Jewishness in the cells of my body. I feel absolutely compelled to act in the world. And it's not that I've just started doing that. I've done it all my life, but I've never really felt the need to put myself to get arrested. Motivation's not the word. I'm compelled. I cannot be a bystander. I know there's been a lot of criticism, and in fact more than criticism. Starmer's government is actually, as we speak, bringing in directions, not laws, but directions for the police to, restrict repetitive demonstrations in the same place. I mean, restrict's not the word. It's an absolute assault on our democracy. And as an aside, I just shake my head. What has happened to Keir Starmer, who started off as a human rights lawyer, defending those who sabotaged some RAF fighter jets who were flying sorties over Iraq, and he argued on the grounds that genocide was a greater crime. And now he's absolutely persecuting, more than prosecuting, he's persecuting all the people who are taking action in the Defend Our Juries actions. I feel that absolutely, like every human would feel devastated about the fact that anybody, let alone Jewish people at synagogue for Yom Kippur, were stabbed. And of course, one person was killed accidentally by the police. So the first thing I'd say is that when Keir Starmer and the Home Secretary and others speak about the Jewish community, am I not part of a Jewish community? Who are they talking about, first of all, when they talk about the Jewish community and protecting the Jewish community? That's the first thing I'd say. To actually refer to the Jewish community as one homogeneous entity, as I've said before, is a form of anti-Semitism in itself because it's objectifying Jews. There's a joke, a Jewish joke. If you put 3 Jews in a room, you'll get 11 opinions. I think to say that we shouldn't protest and exercise our democratic rights because people were stabbed to death, but it's, nonsensical. One act does not cancel out the fact that over 500,000 people, it looks like, have been murdered by the IDF. The synagogue stabbings are being used as an attack on our democracy. I feel it's more important than ever to step up and not allow that slide into fascism. It scares me, especially given my own ancestral history. It really frightens me that somebody like Keir Starmer, a Labor Prime Minister, is actually instigating these laws about restricting protest. I was arrested at 4:15 and I got released about 12:30 a.m. There were 2 new detectives on duty, and And I cracked a joke about, this is a good night to commit a crime, isn't it? Because there were police from Oxfordshire and Wales and everywhere. And in fact, this last demonstration in October, there were police brought over from Northern Ireland. I mean, talk about the paradox of bringing police from Northern Ireland, and not to mention taxpayers' costs. So I said to this police detective, it's a great night to commit a crime. And he got really cross and he said, it's because of people like you that we can't do our job. We should be out there fighting real criminals. And I put my hands on my hips and I said, now, wait a minute. I'm doing this because of the genocide in Palestine, but I'm also doing this for you because, in case you haven't noticed, our democratic rights are being eroded. And I can't believe for 1 minute you think this is the right thing to do. So if you want to blame somebody for the lack of police arresting people doing not good things, I suggest you write to Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer.
My name is Chris Romberg. I'm a retired British Army officer, and in my last appointments in the British Army, I was the defence attaché in the British embassies in Jordan and in Egypt. And there I was able to see from a diplomatic and British government perspective what was going on in the Middle East. I'm also a member of a group called Holocaust Survivors and Descendants Against the Gaza Genocide. What I'd seen for myself while out in the Middle East really has led me to believe that there is a huge injustice taking place against the Palestinian people. And this has really taken off now, obviously, over the last period. And all the demonstrating and writing and speaking that we've been doing needed more. I felt that more needed to be done, and this was an opportunity to do more. My duties in the Middle East were to be the British Ministry of Defence's representative in the countries where I was based, but I was also able to travel elsewhere. And I was able to travel also into Israel and into the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza, and to see some of what was going on there. Now, this was around 20 years ago, and I have to say things, of course, have got incomparably worse. But even at that time, it was clear that there were terrible things going on, and that other British government representatives, diplomats, military personnel were well aware of what was going on and were reporting it back to the government. And yet, nothing was being done to stop it. I joined a group that was formed around then called Holocaust Survivors and Descendants Against the Gaza Genocide, which is a group that has actual survivors of the genocide who survived as children, and those whose parents or grandparents survived the Holocaust. My own father and my grandparents were able to flee, or had to flee, from Austria in 1938 after the so-called Anschluss, the takeover of Austria by the German Nazi regime, and were able to come to Britain. And many others have harrowing tales from their families of surviving camps, ghettos, and other horrible experiences. And so in this group, we are well aware from either our own or our family history of what genocide means. And it appalls us that such a genocide can be taking place yet again this long after the Holocaust ended. The importance for those who are taking part is to some extent to counter the lie that all this is justified by the Holocaust. The opposite is true. The Holocaust should mean never again for anybody. I took part in the Defend Our Juries demonstration on the 9th of August. I was one of the last to be arrested. We started the protest at 1 o'clock. We sat down with signs. We had blank card and black marker pens that we'd all brought. And then at 1 o'clock, as the bell of Big Ben, in whose shadow the Houses of Parliament we were sitting, of rang one, we wrote our message on these signs. And the message that everybody wrote, and I quote what was written on the signs, was, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." Those words were what were written on the signs. And thereafter, we sat, and the police slowly began arresting people. And we continued to sit there, awaiting arrest. And eventually I was arrested at around 6 o'clock in the evening, so after 5 hours. And I was taken from Parliament Square, where we'd been sitting, to a facility that the police had set up quite nearby in a street called King Charles Street, which is right next door to the British Foreign Office. And strangely enough, because I'd worked in embassies, that had been my postal address, where mail was sent to me via the Foreign Office at King Charles Street. And then all those years later, I was being processed after arrest there. I have never been arrested before. It was an unusual experience, but as with almost everybody else there, probably everybody else, there wasn't this feeling of shock and guilt that you might feel if you had done something that you felt was morally wrong. I was doing what I'd gone there to do. I would like to say that as a former member of the British Armed Forces, one of the things that shocks me is how the British Armed Forces are being misused by the government. This is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp by the British Army. And in those days, the British Armed Forces helped to defeat a regime that was conducting genocide. They liberated this camp. It was the first one that the British Armed Forces liberated. The scenes that they found were recorded and published in the papers in Britain and shocked the nation. The British Armed Forces did their best to rescue those who had survived, and not all could be because of the state they were in. And it was the scene of it was the cause of one of the first trials in 1945 for crimes against humanity because of what they find. And now, 80 years later, when that liberation was commemorated in quite a considerable way in Britain, we have the government misusing our armed forces in complicit support of another genocide. And this is not just in the sales of arms, which is what has been made some of the headlines, but in the use of the Air Force, in overflying and intelligence sharing, in the use of the Royal Air Force Base at Akrotiri, in the purchasing of Israeli defense equipment, and in other defense contracts, in the visits of Israeli officers, in the training of Israeli officers in Britain, and of course, in the presence of Israeli arms manufacturers having their factories in Britain. And I think this is shaming to the nation that the government should allow this, and is humiliating for us as a country.